What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Obviously, we're going to spend forever talking about where life has gone wrong and how we got on this timeline. And today we have Elizabeth Jarosz. She is a market research expert and has done some other very interesting things we'll get to talking about, but she's spent a lot of time figuring out why people do the things they do. So we're really excited to have her here today. Please go ahead, introduce yourself, kind of give us the rundown of who you are and why you're here.
Absolutely. So, Elizabeth Jarosz, I've been doing market research now for 25 years, so interviewing people around the country and the world. I get to do it for all kinds of subjects, so it's not just only political. I crawl in the minds of people all the time, from everything related to, real estate to consumer products like your, soap or whatever, to luxury goods. I mean, different target audiences. It's part of what I love about my job is I get to kind of go around the country and sometimes I'm in their homes, sometimes I'm in their stores, and really just talk to people about what's important to them. And it's always about the values and, getting underneath it all. So it's not really about the product, or it's not really about the subject it seems to be about. Mm-hmm. It's more about what makes us tick as humans and how we make decisions and what we value and what we don't value. And so that's the kind of energy I tried to take going into the election research this year.
That is so cool, and so I was doing the bare minimum of research kind of into you and your career path and everything, and it looks like you've got some IMDb cred, like you were an actress for a little while.
Oh. Well, that was a little bit of a blip a long time ago. I moved to Los Angeles in 2000 and very quickly had some opportunities to do some things on camera. And I dabbled a little bit. I realized then if I did anything, it would be hosting. It would be something like hosting. And actually, a fun fact is, I auditioned for American Idol before it was American Idol in the U.S.
Really? So you sing?
Yeah, I went straight to producers. So I almost got the host of American Idol, and then they decided to do celebrity folks. And so it was, of course, Ryan and Seacrest, and then I think it was Dunkelman or somebody, the first season, whoever they chose. So that was my quick brush with potential hosting, and what a different life that would have been.
Yeah, that is crazy. So then obviously you went on and you did The Apprentice, the second season, was it? Yeah. So you have some very firsthand experience with the president-elect, for better or worse. Is he as big of a dick in person as he seems to be to the rest of us?
He is exactly as you see.
Was he shitting his pants already back then when you were in the studio, or was he still because that was back in what, 2004-ish?
Yeah, it was 4, 5, 6, right around there somewhere.
20 years takes a big toll on
somebody. It does. But I heard he's been doing this a while, so I'm just trying to get a timeline on the Depends.
Oh yeah. He's a larger than life character, I still to this day remember what it felt like when I first saw him in person. So we didn't get to see him. We went through this whole audition process. 1 million applied that year and they chose 16. It was the longest audition process you'll ever, we could do a whole nother podcast on that. It's really fascinating. I mean, they drew blood. They took it was,
Holy cow.
So then you finally get picked, right? And so you get there and there's a bunch of press leading up to it, but you don't get to talk to any of the other contestants. So the first time you get to speak to anybody or do anything is we were standing in the boardroom and he walks in, and I'll never forget that moment. I mean, he really does have a presence, a charisma in person.
See, I told you he has Riz.
Some people just have it. What was that?
We were joking the other day. Jordan didn't think that he had charisma, and I said, "Oh, he definitely has Riz." I mean, he ran The Apprentice successfully for many seasons.
Hey, in fairness, Riz is different from charisma.
Okay.
The Gen Z needs to enlighten us because we're just trying to use your words now.
Riz is derived from charisma. Obviously, it's within the word, but Riz is when you're rizzing up a girl. It's flirting.
He does that too a lot.
Yeah, but it's not reciprocated, so that's not Riz. That's just harassment.
Okay. Yep. No.
I always get the question, "Did he ever hit on you?" And the answer is no. So he never hit on me personally.
Maybe if we had one.
And how did that make you feel?
I was fine. I'm fine with it. Part of me now, seeing how many people he hits on, I was like, well, what does that mean? But
Yeah, I know. Like I was wondering, because that's got us start to wonder: is there something wrong with me? Is it something wrong with him? It's definitely something wrong with him, to be clear. But
oh, thank you.
Anyway, so did you glean anything from your personal experience with him as to kind of where the timeline has brought us to today? Has that kind of like
there were no indications back then that he would run for office, like especially the president. I mean, none. Like, and I would say I still have friends that were producers of the show and things like that. Nobody saw that coming, way back then. It really was, a game show, and it was, for fun. Right. So the stakes were very different.
And I almost feel like when he ran for president, it was a game show. Like to him at the time.
A joke. He just wanted to win. Like in the sense of like he's playing Survivor. He just wants to win. He's not there to do the job. He wants to get first place and then be done.
Well, and I mean, I think because I've heard from people on his staff at the time that like when he was running against Hillary, that it was about coming in a respectable second. Like, he didn't even want to win at that point. Like, they were as caught off guard as the rest of us.
I remember that in the very early on. He himself was like, this is kind of almost like a joke. Like,
it was a grift. It was another way to
do it. Yeah.
It was a game show to him. It was
and
just
then
the
he
next.
realized he could win, and
so
that's when
I actually heard that he did like his fake like coming down the escalator thing with like fake fans. Like he like hired actors to like be his fans as like a ploy to get Apprentice to keep, NBC to keep airing The Apprentice. And so it was like a play because he wasn't getting paid what he wanted to get paid or whatever. But then like he got so much random, and he had booked like 2 rallies just to like do a little bit. And then after those first couple rallies, he was like, oh, actually, these are a lot of people and they really like me and maybe I will do this and why not? And like the most Donald Trump thing you could possibly do.
Well, so Elizabeth, I guess what I was asking is not necessarily did you think that he would run for president, but like the way that he has ran for president and then the way that he, has done the president. Do you feel like you've gleaned any inside information just from your personal experience with him or inside experience where like, no, this doesn't surprise you, or you are just you're blown away by how off the rails this shit has gotten, and like, do you feel that this is on par or not? I guess.
Okay, so I'm going to answer it 2 ways.
Yeah.
The first is I've got a great story for you. Okay, so
love a good story.
In some ways, it's similar to how he used to be. Okay, so that's the first answer, and then I'll get into in some ways it's escalated. Okay, but to stick with the first one. So I remember this was after we were done shooting the show, and it was afterward. We had a lot of parties and press and things like that, and so we were in like a New York bar, like this swanky kind of bar with like you have the tables and we're all around the table, and I'm having this conversation with him about PR. And I came originally from Procter & Gamble. I was a brand manager at P&G for about 5 years. And there is very fundamental marketing, and you don't want to do anything that would hurt a brand's image, right? That just tanks the business. So I come from a philosophy that not all press is good press. Like, you have to take care of the brand image. And he was like, absolutely not. All press is good press. In fact, the more bad press you get, the more you do. And that's when you become an icon. And I'll never forget him saying that to me. And I do think he's held true to sort of that. I think I've always said this about him. I do think he's pretty good at publicity.
Oh, he's excellent at publicity.
One of his big skills, right? And so for him, all publicity is good publicity. And so I think that's part of what, accelerated his first run, what's kept him in the mix. I personally think not just, in the last administration, but for many administrations before, I think the PR for our political parties has been terrible.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't know, and this is for both sides. We don't know what they're doing. It's not said in a way where we relate to it as human beings, or we're involved in it. And in this day and age of social media and the way things are, I think Donald Trump really has a leg up, and that has, I think, helped him. And I think some of his current cabinet picks, which we'll probably get into at some point, have a little bit to do with that, right? They're all good communicators. They're all kind of celebrity, or not celebrities, but like people you know because they've made noise, you know. And if they get confirmed, they're probably going to be communicators on his behalf, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so in that way, I think he's held true to who he is. On another level, I think it's like the more you do, the bigger you get. Like, and so like the more extreme he started to step into, the more extreme he got. And then the next year, more extreme. And then the next year, more extreme, right? So we're seeing him say and do things now that in 2016, we would have never sort of thought possible or tolerated, right?
No.
So, so in that way, I think he's different.
Okay. And that's fair. So I guess just to kind of continue through the intro of yourself before we really dig into the.
Oh, we're still in my bio, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
In a way.
In a way. I was gonna ask, you know, how you went from acting to market research or whatnot, but clearly it seems like you kind of started there, and acting was the step out, or the kind of entertainment industry aspect of that.
Well, if you want the true story, so I was at Procter & Gamble. I was a brand manager. I've always had a visual creative spark, and I really wanted to direct film. And so I told my boss I'm going to go direct a film and I have to quit, and they didn't want me to quit, so they gave me this leave of absence. So I had this 3-month leave of absence to go to Los Angeles and direct. And so I took a course on film directing. I directed a short film and I really loved it. It actually won Best Short Drama in the New York International Film Festival.
That's awesome.
So I was very proud of it. And it was during that time that I decided, you know what, I'm going to stay in Los Angeles. And so right after that, I quit the real job, right? And I was here and I was thinking about like, what can I do where I could, you know, consult, work, you know, a certain number of days a month, like 5 days a month, and still earn a really good living, right? And then be able to do all these creative things in LA. And so the thing
It's
that
the
I came
question
up
we
with,
all ask.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce you.
How can we work 5 days a month, still
then
earn a really
still
good?
be-
Yeah.
I mean, that was the question. And I found, and I could do that with this market research job. So, you know, I took it. It wasn't even for the market research at the time. It was because that was the job that fit that criteria, right? And I did love it. I did love interviewing people. I loved, you know, the strategy of it, like, you know, helping brands like take the market research and make it a strategy for a brand. And so while I was doing that, some of these opportunities came my way from an acting standpoint. And then also like The Apprentice sort of started at a certain point. And so I had auditioned for that, you know, and then that happened. And then after that, I had always wanted to report news. And I'm originally from Detroit, so I got the chance to report news for NBC in Detroit. It's the WDIV station, which was just like a life dream for me. So it was really fun to be able to do that. And then I just kept doing the market research because that was the thing that was like, you know, always there, and I really loved it. And here I am. I mean, still sort of doing it, and now like trying to combine production with the market research. So I started my YouTube channel and things like that. It's very new. So, you know, I'm just sort of new at it, but it gets to combine a lot of my creativity and the things I like to do. So.
Absolutely. So, self-proclaimed or accurately titled, I guess I don't know, a market research expert specializing in the human condition is what I got from your LinkedIn, you know?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what that means? Like, what is what is that specifically?
Part of that sounds like some LinkedIn, you know, really
Does
good.
it
Yeah, I
sound
got
good
a
or
title on
no?
mine.
Well, I don't know. And I've been doing it 25 years. I interview so many people every day, every week. I feel like I do. I feel like I do have some level of expertise in terms of like, I've got these like interview techniques where I can, you know, get certain things out of people and, you know, that I need to elicit, you know, depending on the subject matter. So I guess that's the first part of it. And then specializing in the human condition, it's really kind of what I said at the beginning. It's really about us and our humanity and what we value deep down. Like, that's what I'm interested in. And I think that's actually what moves people, what helps us make decisions, you know, of any sort. And I will say, in this divided time, I'm going to say it, I've interviewed people around the world. And everywhere I go, like we are truly, I know this is going to sound Pollyanna-ish, but we are more alike than we are different. I mean, even like if I interview Trump supporters and
absolutely.
Paris or whatever, like if I go deep enough, we actually value pretty similar things, and so that gives me a little bit of hope.
That's funny. I was just on a mini vacation with my dad, and it was like 1 a.m. We were both had a few drinks, and I'm a self-proclaimed socialist, and he voted for Trump. And at the end of the night, we were like, yeah, like you mostly want what's the best for the country, and so do I. We just have very different ways of getting about it. And he
just one of us is a moron.
That's not how I ended it with my father, but
I probably would have.
But I would agree with that sentiment.
I honestly think I don't know if you're familiar with John Russell. He spoke at the DNC.
Oh yeah.
But he does some stuff with More Perfect Union that is he goes to Trump rallies kind of like Walter Masterson does, but he does it in not to be a douchebag to them types of ways, and he's basically just like, hey, and he looks the part. He's got the mullet, wears the flannel.
I've seen his stuff, yeah.
And
Don Lemon.
Yeah. He goes and he's like, okay, so, and he just starts pitching progressive and leftist policies, and they're like, yeah, abso-fucking-lutely, and he's like, all right, what if I told you I was a communist?
Yeah, he does a plot twist or whatever, yeah.
And they're like, yeah, he's like, see, we're not that far apart. So I think that it doesn't surprise me at all. Like, yeah, it's a very kumbaya thing that I feel like we kind of dismiss at this point, but it is true. Like, we're all people, and we're all technically on the same side. Like, there's like, we all need a habitable planet to live on, and enough money to pay our rent and buy our groceries and get where we're going, and that's the reality. And just some of us view how we achieve that a little bit differently because of our understandings of the world. So,
and the media we watch,
and absolutely the media we watch, which is our understandings of the world, right? Like that's where we really form our opinions, is because of media, I would assume.
And speaking how voters, decide what they're going to do and get to that, kumbaya moment in the way that they seem best fits. I was watching a bunch of your stuff, and it looked like you kind of boiled it down to 3 major things, at least for undecided voters, which I know that's who you're talking to the most, which makes the most sense, obviously. But there's the feeling and just overall sentiment of the U.S., economy and just like the vibes. And then there's, protected democracy and immigration for some people. And then, of course, there was a fair amount of women's rights issues discussion that was had as well. If you want to just, if you can sum up, your months and months of, talking to people in a very short period of time, what was that like? How did that feel to you? And, how did things end up?
Where did things go wrong?
Where did things go wrong? Well, okay, I'm going to caveat this by saying nobody knows exactly everything that happened, right? And what I'm about to say is a subset of things. Like, I could go on for hours about all the other things too. So, I don't want anybody to sort of take this as, the only reasons. But I have been interviewing for about a year now, pretty consistently, people who voted. And I can tell you that, and I also have Ipsos, the company I work for, behind me, which does a lot of research globally and domestically. And I can tell you that, like, the first thing that you mentioned, just sort of the vibes, is a big deal. So, like, Biden's approval rating was 37%. That's really low historically. Okay, usually, like at Ipsos, we say the cutoff is 40%. If you're not above 40%, chances are you're not going to win re-election. And if you look at the successors of someone with that level of approval rating, so like Ipsos looked at it globally, like over many, many years of elections. So we're talking about a lot of elections. And if the approval rating was 40%, the successor, and this is across countries, but including the US, has a 1 in 8 chance of winning. Okay, so it's low. All right. So just contextually, it was a tough market, if you will. Okay. You know what I mean? And then you add on to it, just sort of the state that people were feeling, the vibes that people were feeling. So like, for example, if you look at the numbers for the economy, like on paper, it's actually quite good. If you look at the US economy relative to the global economy post-COVID, we're the envy of the world, right? Factually, right?
Yeah, right.
But the vibes, what people are feeling is not that. And the Biden administration, this is pre-Harris even, when I was interviewing people, the sentiment was, they don't understand me, then they're not listening to me. Because the Biden administration kept saying, but the economy's good, the economy's good. And people were saying, but I'm hurting, right? I'm hurting. This, I can't buy this, I can't afford this. And they're saying, but it's great. So they're not listening, right? Like they were talking on two different levels. So just contextually, it was a really rough, situation for anybody to step into. And then you've got Harris, who stepped in, who some people feel, especially on the conservative side, weren't she didn't earn it, right? She was like anointed. And if you really dig into it, the reason is because there was no option. They would have lost all of the money, the campaign funds, if they had picked anybody else. And at that late in the game, that's the decision they made. Right?
I don't think that there was any other. I mean, we talked about this kind of extensively, going in through that whole transition period, and it's like, we could talk about the ideal candidates we would all love to see in that position, but there really was no other option. The way that they drug it out. Now, had Biden bowed out earlier, had Biden never ran in 2020, there's different ways it could have went, but at that point.
Yeah. And I think originally he said he was going to be a one-term president, and then I don't know what happened to that, but
you have to have a certain level of narcissism to run for the presidency. I mean, there's really no two ways about that. Like you cannot be a truly philanthropic, empathetic person and want to be president.
I don't know. I'm just gonna call. I'm just gonna put my one
Bernie.
Bernie plug.
They're throwing Bernie out there.
Episode is Bernie's been saying the same thing since
retire, man.
1940, and just put it out there.
I have to back you up on this, and I don't know how popular or not this is going to be, but I think back when Hillary was running, Bernie was a big deal, and I honestly believe Bernie would have beat Trump in 2016.
He absolutely would have.
And I can tell you that when I was interviewing people, the same people were interested in Trump as were interested in Sanders. Especially on the.
I hear that argument all the time. That was the first election I could vote in. I had turned in like 18, like a month before the election.
Stop making me feel so
I know,
fucking
you're
old.
But so I went and I'm saying this as someone who went and I pissed off my mom, who was a big Hillary. I voted for Bernie in the primary, right? I was very excited about it. It started a family feud amongst the left. He didn't win the primary. Like, he could not have won the election if he didn't win the primary.
Okay. That's not true too, because there's two things. The primary is not indicative of a general election. Like, the primary requires you to win votes that are completely fucking irrelevant in the general election, and the DNC did not play an up and up game with Bernie.
Like super delegates. Like, come on.
Yeah, the super delegates. The fact that Debbie Wasserman Schultz very clearly conspired against him, got caught conspiring against him, stepped down from chair of the DNC for conspiring against him, and then the Hillary campaign hired her as the...
See, I start the Bernie talk, and people just can't stop.
Now we're off on Bernie.
I know that we always pander to the middle too much, and I'm anti, but I do think that he was the one to pave the way for the crazy left thoughts, and it was too early on. If he was younger and had run this time, maybe he would have won, but I think it was a little...
That was our perfect window for the best timeline.
Anyways. I do see what you're saying, because he was labeled as a socialist. I do see what you're saying.
It was like people were like, it was, and maybe it's just because I was so young, so I was new to the game, but it felt like a newer concept that like people were pissed about it to a degree that felt wild.
See, but I didn't find any of the hatred towards Bernie in like any of the circles. And now, obviously, I live in a very rural, very like conservative area. And I didn't find any of the, like, people had loathing, like, with the depths of their soul loathing for Hillary Clinton, right? Like, hated her. They're like, oh, yeah, Bernie wants to just give everything away for free because poor, and then, like, but they had nothing that was nothing that was connected to them. Like anything negative they had to say was just a random talking point they could grasp at, but it was nothing like you could see you mentioned Hillary Clinton's name and their eyes just glaze over.
I'm confident
and,
they would have found it.
But
If they
this-
would have
Yeah,
found
maybe.
something. They
Whatever.
would have found it.
but here's the thing: is the Clintons have had. Sorry, the Clintons have had.
You want to take this outside right now?
Oh my God! Right, let's fisticuffs. No, the Clintons have had decades of opportunity. Well, the Republicans have had decades of opportunity to build dirt against the Clintons. Like they've had. All
No,
they had
you're
to do.
not wrong, yeah.
And that was my biggest issue with Hillary was not anything to do necessarily with her. I have plenty of issues with how she ran her campaign, but the fact that you can't take somebody who's been entrenched in the political system that long, because then the Republicans have all of the dirt. They've been building things. You know, they've got Benghazi. They've got Hillary's emails. They've got Clinton got his dick sucked on an airplane, and that's a problem for some reason. Bullshit.
Crazy for that one.
For decades,
Crazy for
you
that
know.
one.
And
He
they
also got his dick sucked on an airplane. I thought it was the Oval.
This man was everywhere.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
was
it's
everywhere.
it's
he
like Willie.
covered his bases.
I really thought the Monica Lewinsky thing was on Air Force One.
No,
I don't know. I honestly
No.
like
That was in
it
the
was
Oval.
before my time, so I
I
never
think
really
it
looked
was
into
the Oval
that.
Office, but-
Clintons were already gone by the time I was involved in this, so I never.
right.
Anyway.
Alive.
So I do think that there is something to be said because one of the things I think with Obama's success, and I always go back to that, is our last really truly successful election as Democrats was nobody knew who the fuck he was, and they're having to start from scratch. So yeah, they're gonna dig stuff up, but it takes a long time to
Yeah, but
build
he was
that.
pretty middle.
I mean,
He was pretty
Well,
middle.
Hillary wasn't.
This might bring us
He
back to
was.
present too. I think
Bernie
part
isn't.
of
That was my point. Sorry.
part
Gotcha.
of Bernie's magic, a couple of things. One, you said it. He says the same thing over and over. He's authentic, right? You can trust him. You know what he stands for, right? That's part of it. The other part of it is he talks at people's level. So it's like, yeah, that's how I think, or I understand it. It's not like this high level political speak that means nothing and feels inauthentic, right? And so, believe it or not, Trump, believe it or not,
Oh, he does.
He speaks at
Trump
like a second grade
supporters-
level. Yeah.
the Trump supporters feel similarly about Donald Trump. When I ask the question, who's more honest,
tells it like
you know,
is.
Harris or
So
Trump?
crazy that
I'm
we're calling
always
him
like, I mean, you know,
honest.
he lies constantly, so you'd think they're not going to say Trump, right? But they do. They say Trump. I was like, why do you feel like he's more honest? Because he says what he thinks, right? He doesn't filter himself, and so they think that is authenticity, that is honesty, and he speaks, you know, at a pretty, you know, low grade level in terms of, you know, and people, you know, hear that and understand it and resonate with it. And so for the same reasons that Bernie was, you know, sort of resonating, you've got a different character, Trump. over here.
It's populism. It boils down to populism. But what boggles my mind with that is like if you had a family member who was exactly like Trump, they are the person you would kick out of Thanksgiving dinner. Like none of these people who appreciate the way that Trump talks on the national stage would tolerate that in their own lives very long. They would be the person like, "Oh fuck, he's coming. No, I'm not going to this event because he's going to be there and that guy is annoying as fuck." Like nobody would
He's irritating.
he's
yeah.
so irritating, right?
It's
But here's the difference. You don't have to have them at your table.
Fair.
So when I interview the Trump supporters, even undecideds who didn't think they would vote for Trump, like Nikki Haley supporters who till the end weren't sure who they were going to vote for, they will look past the personal. They don't like him personally, and they're looking past it because they are thinking he's going to be better for the economy. I was better off under Trump's administration. It's literally that simple.
Yeah.
And
And
you know,
wrong,
we'll
so.
see how that works out for them, you know, in the next 4 years.
Absolutely.
We'll see,
We
you
will.
know, like
I feel like I keep derailing, but it reminds
Oh.
me of the memes of everyone talking about like Twitter or the Republicans getting upset because like people are cutting off their family members, and everyone's like, yeah, you guys are so upset right now because now you have to deal with each other, and you fucking have to realize you don't like each other. Like
Yeah.
you're annoying. Like, and now you're stuck and you're seeing that, and yeah, you don't like Trump on a personal level because he sucks.
What were you saying?
No, I was actually gonna ask kind of about like the whole like I felt richer under Trump and like illegals getting banned. I watched a couple of your videos and some of the things that people talked about, and I was sort of wondering if when you're doing the market research, meetings, the group kind of conversations, how much sort of like, I don't want to say fact checking because I don't feel like that would be anything you'd really ever do, but how do you, when you approach questions, do you provide any sort of factual context, or is it just like how do you feel about this?
So I'm sort of like the anti-reporter, if you will.
Okay.
And some people like that. Some people maybe don't. But
So
I
Fox
take
News?
it seriously. I
Whoa.
take it seriously.
Those aren't
I
even
don't.
reporters.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
It's
It
fighting
said Fox
words.
News, anti-reporter.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah, but that's a different anti-reporter. But what I was saying is, I never ask, or try not to ask a leading question. So all my questions are really open-ended. I don't do a lot of fact checking, almost never, right? Because for me, it's what they think. I'm interested in their perceptions, not in like interjecting my own. Now, I will say I do every once in a while make exceptions. So when I was trying to explore internalized sexism, I had to kind of do some of that because
Nobody's going to come out and say it right off the bat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like not only that they don't want to come out and say it, they don't know that they have it. It's what's called an unconscious bias. We all have it. It's just nobody's fault,
Absolutely,
right? It's just like, and so I would have to do a little bit of like, okay, so they would say, Harris is not qualified, right? Like, she just doesn't feel ready, right? Like this would come out a lot. And so like one of the groups I was doing, I said, okay, well, let's explore that a little bit. Like, do you know like what her past roles are? Oh yeah, she was Attorney General, she was in the Senate, she was a VP. Okay. So like, how does that compare to like what Trump's qualifications were, in 2016? Oh,
Business.
But
He
The
did
Apprentice.
business.
how does that compare to like, Barack Obama's
Casinos.
qualifications when he ran for president? Oh, yeah, but she still doesn't feel ready. Like she still doesn't feel, okay, I didn't know what she did as VP. Okay, well, like, could you tell me what other VPs did? Like, what did Pence do when he was VP? Oh, well, so, I don't normally do that, but we had to kind of like, so then the conversation was
it
like,
out of 'em.
so what really is it about? What really is it about? And it came down to, fear that other countries wouldn't respect a woman as our leader was mostly what it came down to. And especially countries that don't value women. And
Feels like a
so
little bit of projection, maybe.
So the countries that don't
The
value, so
calls
like
coming
we're
from
worried about what
inside the house.
Afghanistan's gonna think about our president. The countries that don't value women, because all of our
Iran
peer,
came up a lot.
all of
Yeah.
our
But what will Putin think?
Right, yeah. I mean, but like all of our peer countries, or not all, but a lot of our peer countries have had women leaders, prime
Yes.
minister. Like it's just crazy. Other countries,
But
the
that gets
guy who literally got laughed out of G7 summits and UN meetings and stuff. He's the one that they're going to respect, but the woman is the problem.
Right. That's right.
Love it.
I mean, and for the most part, I love what I do. I don't really interject my opinions, and I really let them tell me what they think, and I think it's important to create that safe space so we can understand where people are coming from, and not so much try to convince them,
Yeah.
and then afterward we can do whatever needs to be done with that information, but.
Yeah, I think it would be, and obviously this is not exactly what you do, but like it'd be interesting to kind of do that originally and then be like, well, for immigration, like immigrants aren't doing more crime. Immigrants aren't a drain on the economy. They actually provide more money for our Social Security and the economy. They generally don't bring drugs across the border illegally. That's U.S. citizens. It'd be interesting to see what people would respond with when faced with sort of the antidote to what Trump is
facts.
saying.
Literally facts. And that is an interesting
don't care
point,
about your
is
feelings,
because you have them in a captive setting, right? Like they agree to be usually in these settings, especially with your focus groups. So they're sitting there at a table across from you, and they more or less have to respond to whatever question you ask them and the information you give them on the spot. And that would be really interesting to be like, all right, I want to objectively get your feelings on all of all of the things that you feel about your perception of the world currently, and like, all right, now I want to ask all of these questions, but provide you with some context. And here is the context on this issue. Now, understanding that context, how do you feel about the same question? Re-ask that question. Do you ever do anything like that? How do you feel about that? Do you think that that would affect the authenticity of your research? I mean, I'm curious.
Well, I think if you did the open-ended stuff first and then you shared, I think you'd be fine, right? You'd get both, right? You'd get sort of the, I wouldn't affect them, and then we would see what the implication is of creating facts or not creating, showing them facts. I think one of the reasons I said creating is because when I have done a little bit of that, there is such a distrust of facts in the media right now that some people are like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And they might have a shift. And other people, and I would say maybe a majority, and I feel that this is unfortunate, but I think a majority will say, especially if it goes against everything they've been hearing in their media for so long, they're going to say, I don't believe that. Where did you get that from? I don't believe that source, or I don't believe. And so that's a tough one, and that's new. That I can say that, if I'm looking back 8 years ago, that wasn't happening.
Sure.
I remember the whole
Fake news.
What was her name that said alternative facts for the first time? Kellyanne Conway.
Yep.
Yeah.
When she said it, and everyone was like, "What's an alternative fact?" You know what I mean? Like,
Wasn't
since
it?
that
Wasn't
moment,
it? Wasn't it? Who was the White House press secretary? Spicer. Sean Spicer.
Spencer.
Spicer, yeah.
He was the one who said alternative facts, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. Okay, I didn't know.
He said those are your facts, and we have some alternative facts. Like at a White House press secretary, like
that tracks.
Yeah, and you could tell. I remember Sean Spicer. I wanted to feel bad for him because he you could tell he hated his life, and he's like, I don't know.
Really
I don't know what I got myself into, and you could just see the despair on his face every day he walked out there.
Relatable.
And a reporter would ask a question. He's like, okay, this is the answer that would be the right human thing to do, and this is the answer that will keep me my job. But I'm pretty sure he was the alternative facts guy.
Could be.
My favorite
was.
Sean Spicer stuff is when Melissa McCarthy played him on SNL.
Oh my God, yes. She was so good.
That was amazing.
Fantastic.
So, kind of going off of this alternative facts aspect of things, as somebody who's been in the mind of average American voters for a while now, do you feel like there's a way to kind of roll this back, or is this sort of the new status quo?
Yeah, how do we
Alternative facts?
Right.
You're asking?
the whole thing.
I really think what I said earlier is true, that the media that we consume is significantly impacting our perception of the world. So and we've actually proved this out at Ipsos, numerically, in big numbers with thousands of people, right? Like if you look at what media they consume, if it's more left-leaning, liberal-leaning, they think a whole way, right? And then if they watch conservative media, it's like they think exact opposite way on the same issues. And if you ask them about the facts, they think two separate things are true. So we're no longer living in the same universe of facts, or what we think are facts, right?
So it's the social media algorithm?
I don't see that. I think it's media. Social media is a big part of it, but even cable news.
Sure.
If you watch Fox versus MSNBC, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like different universes. I do that a lot. I will switch from one to the other because I'm just a curious human, and I want to see how they're often they're not even covering the same things, but if they are, they're covering them wildly differently. Yeah,
unfortunately, I subscribe to Late Stage Capitalism and Are Conservative on Reddit, and it's a little different.
You're really brave for that.
Yeah.
It takes some mental effort to open up that notification.
Someone's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it.
Which, I mean, to credit to what you do, too, I want to believe that I could do the job that you're doing here and just objectively ask questions with absolutely no, and then just accept their answers without being like, how are you this fucking stupid? Not saying that, but it's
hard.
a knee-jerk reaction for me at this point. I don't know how you manage to just choke it down, stifle it.
Oh, it's 25 years of training. It's a lot of training. I have to do it for my clients all the time too, you know. But I remember like it was maybe like 3-4 years ago, we were doing a project on abortion rights, and there were a few of my colleagues, and we're all really trained, and we're all, you know, but that one was a bridge too far for some folks, and so some of my colleagues were like, I can't do it, because we were interviewing people on both sides of the issue, right? And you know, really being very neutral, and so, you know, I could have an interview of someone who's incredibly liberal and, you know, to the extreme of, you know, timing for abortions and all that. And then the next interview, incredibly conservative. You know, I'm remembering one right now where she herself was adopted, you know, because her mother didn't want the child, and she felt that she wouldn't even be here if, you know, her mother had made that other choice to have an abortion. And above, on top of that, she was very religious, and there was all this, you know, and you have to, you don't have to, but you know, you choose to do these interviews and really allow people to express their feelings, you know, and feel really heard.
Yeah, I can't imagine having to do that.
I don't believe you
nowadays.
could do it either, Jordan.
Yeah, I did it in college, but I studied like product design, so we had to do like product user research and market like focus groups. I couldn't imagine doing it for social issues. though.
No. Yeah, I mean, when I started college for a psychology degree, and my initial thing that I wanted to do was IO, industrial organizational psychology, which is basically the psychological aspect of market research, how to design products and market products psychologically to people. And I think I would have really enjoyed it, but it's one of those things, like, you're more likely to get drafted to the NFL than you are to, you know, find, because there's so few jobs in that specific field.
That's why I gave up.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I gave up. I'm like, all right, I'll just add a business. I'll double major and be done with it.
Doing marketing now.
Yep. What you got?
I wanted to talk about the woman voter, and there was a couple statistics showing that less people voted for Harris than for Biden, and less people voted for Harris than even Clinton by a couple percent.
It's crazy.
And we had a brief moment in the last episode where we were talking about internalized misogyny for women and men, and obviously we kind of touched on it here too, but I was just curious because it's so drastic, the difference between the abortion rights, I talk about it all the time, individual propositions on ballot measures. Like 7 out of 10 ballot measures for abortion rights were, you know, approved by states in various measures, and had like 5 to 10%, you know, more favorability than Harris. Was there anything about Harris that caused like that drastic difference, or was it her campaign, or was it just Democrat messaging?
Super weird that Harris didn't effectively tie herself to the abortion issue, and the fact that ballot measures way outperformed Harris across the board. Like, even in the states where they didn't pass, like in Florida, it didn't pass because it required 60%, and they got like 54, 56%.
I guess the question is then, like, how did this is considered left ideology pass so popularly everywhere, but Harris failed?
Like, Harris underperformed it in the same places on the same ballots.
I have a thought on this, and it's just based on my experience of interviewing people. I will say that even the conservative women I interviewed were conflicted because of the abortion issue. Okay, so like, they weren't sure they were going to vote conservative or for Trump because women's rights, bodily autonomy, abortion were that important to them. There was an actual conflict. I would have predicted that women would have come out in much higher numbers, a lot like the polls were predicting. I was surprised. Okay. In hindsight, though, and when I started interviewing the people who didn't ultimately vote for Harris, it was less about Harris. If you look at kind of what you guys said, like where abortion was on the ballot separately as its own, you know, proposition or whatever. Think about it. If you're conservative and that's what's conflicting you, and in your state you can vote for choice on this proposition, but then you can vote conservatively for the president. You get both. You get both.
Best of both
right?
worlds, right?
Also, the states with the strictest abortion bans are not necessarily the swing states.
True.
So when we're hearing this, deep concern in some of these states that have these bans that, women are dying, those weren't the swing states that ultimately decide the election. So so for those reasons, I think that's part of what we're seeing.
But interestingly enough, in the midterms, where abortion was on the ballots in a few states as well, and special elections, we had Democrats perform really well alongside those ballot measures. Then in the general election, that was not the case.
Yeah. I don't know if we know for sure if that was because of abortion. The hypothesis is it was. I don't know.
No.
I didn't do a lot of research around the midterms.
Sure. It is the underreported elections, those midterms.
But I mean, the midterms were interesting because the midterms. I wish we had more data on those midterms because they didn't end up going the way that traditionally midterms went or the way that we expected them to go. And that's why the hypothesis came, because abortion was on the ballot. Roe was just overturned, and obviously Americans have the memory of fucking goldfish, and maybe that's part of it too. It was fresh on their mind then, and it's been a little bit more forgotten now, or it feels just a little bit more comfortable. We've just gotten to the idea that, like, yeah, we're used to this. It still hasn't affected most of our lives, like, on a personal level. So it's not as big of a deal as maybe a lot of people felt it was when it was being overturned. I'm not sure, but it's curious. And it's frustrating to not understand how you've got a woman running for president. A woman's issue is, like, top of the ticket, like, front and center in American politics. Women are the biggest demographic electorate in the country, and there was a failure across the board to tie that issue to the Harris candidacy.
I know. Abortion never ranked high, though, when we ranked the issues. Like, it was never in the top. I don't even think it was in the top 5, which was shocking.
That is shocking.
To me.
That's what I was
Because
saying last episode,
qualitatively, when I talk to people, it was on their radar, like, as a big issue. But when we asked people to rank the biggest issues, and that was one of them, it never ended up, going to the top. And for some of the women that I interview, like, if you can imagine, like let's say a single mom, or even not a single mom, a mom, right, somewhere, and she's struggling to feed her children, right? She's going to vote for the economy over the abortion issue, even though abortion rights are really important to her, right? She's trying to feed her children, right? So economy is always sort of,
and it always has been. I mean, in the American electorate and political system. But it's also been weird and frustrating that obviously, statistically, factually, Democrats way up. It's not even close. Way outperform Republicans on every single economic metric across the board. You cannot find a single economic metric where Republicans in the past. Well, we're conservatives, if you make it conservatives ever, but Republicans since, Teddy Roosevelt, basically, you can't find a single Republican policy that has economic policy that has outperformed Democrats when it comes to that. And so, like, the fact that they've been able to
brand themselves as the economy party when their economies always suck. Like, how?
And so it's just crazy to me and frustrating, and that's a breakdown in Democratic messaging, obviously. But it's just crazy to me, like, hearing people vote for the economy, and it's like, yeah, because and I keep seeing the memes going around. Well, oh, your wife died and you lost your child on the way to the hospital because
thank God you got those eggs.
Yeah, you got eggs 10 cents cheaper, but that's not going to be the case
the gas
either.
was cheaper to get there,
right? But those memes
still didn't make it in time.
Those memes are frustrating to me because it's not going to be, like, our high gas prices.
You're going to be fucked on eggs and your wife's life.
Yeah, exactly.
So congrats, you got none.
And that's why you see those. Even though I agree with the sentiment of the memes in that sense, it's still like.
Still doesn't ring out true.
Mind-boggling. Yeah. It doesn't. It's not going to be. It's going to be more expensive to get your wife to the hospital where she's going to die.
And you're going to get screwed by those medical bills afterwards too. You're not going to be able to afford a funeral.
So I don't know.
I mean, I think it comes down to the Democrats' response and this how we kind of where we go from here is, I think, the question that we're all sort of asking. And
Everyone's wondering that, yeah.
yeah, and I think it really relies upon the ability to respond to the the Republican
How this
messaging,
goes.
because there's no, we can talk all about like facts, like tariffs don't work the way you think they do, immigrants are actually good, but like the people that need to hear that, they're not really listening to the way that we're talking right now. It almost feels like we need to completely just like change up the vocabulary and like the syntax, like the literal way that we're talking. It needs to be different and in a way that is actually combative of Donald Trump's style.
And in a way that resonates with people,
Right.
like talking to them about their own lives, and how it's going to affect them, right?
So
Rather than just the facts.
do you or the company you work with or for do anything with this data aside from compiling it and give it like I guess that's the question. Do you do anything with the data, or do you just compile it and allow the people who
Accessible, yeah.
or it's accessible, or the people who hire you who want it, what's the next step after you compile and collect all this data, because you've obviously done this for years and years and years for lots of different people? What do you do with that data once it's compiled?
So there's two sides. There's more than two sides to Ipsos, but for simplicity, we'll talk about two sides, right? There's the data side, or what they call quantitative research, and then there's not the touchy-feely interviewee stuff, like what I do, which is the qualitative side, right? So on the data side, Ipsos, it feeds a lot of the major polls and other data that you see. So you'll see an Ipsos ABC poll, or ABC Ipsos, they usually put ABC first, or Ipsos routers poll, or whatever you know what I mean, the Ipsos USA Today poll, right? So in those cases, we're typically we're giving the data, and they do what they do with the data, right? On the qualitative end, it's a little bit different. Like I have a project right now. It's for an organization I can't say the name of necessarily, but I'm interviewing moderate white women across certain states, and I have been tracking them since before the election. And then I did it in the moment when they voted and right after they found out the results. And then I'm going to do something at inauguration.
So were you actually doing exit polls? Sorry,
I wasn't. No,
Okay.
I didn't do any exit polls. But this is just this is 42 women that is just part of one study, and I'm interviewing them at different phases as they go through this. And for that organization, I am helping them with how can they go about their messaging to these women, moving forward, and so for their communication and things like that. And so I'll have recommendations for them in that regard. So that's how sometimes it can be used.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that's kind of nerdy, but
No. It's exactly I suppose what we were expecting from this, and I I don't know.
But I can tell you this: I stand up next to my television all the time, screaming, going, "Why don't you just say this?"
All of us have this collective experience. We're usually all texting each other at the exact same time. Like, what the fuck just came out of this person's
Dude,
mouth?
Did you just check Twitter right now? It's fucking bad.
I'm constantly saying, "This is not hard. Just say this," to my television.
So now you said earlier that you are kind of starting a YouTube channel and trying to do a little bit more social media interaction, sort of on par, in line with the market research that you do and what you're currently doing. Like, what's your goal with that? What's because obviously you're generating this data. I'm assuming that's kind of translating to what you want to do with social media. And what is your goal with that? Is that the same question as before, but now personally, because that's separate
what's your
from
personal mission?
Well, I really wanted to just give voters a voice. This is how it started, right? So I was looking at a lot of the media, and I was like, gosh, we're getting a lot of opinions by news people and pundits and things like that. But I want to hear what the actual voters think. this is what you think they think, but like, what do they really think? And I'm equipped to do that. So I was like, if I want to know that, maybe some other people would want to know that, right? So I thought, oh, maybe I'll just, do some of this on my own, and I might as well put it out there somewhere. And I chose YouTube. So it's like literally me Googling, how do you upload to YouTube? I mean, I was so new, right? And so so I'm just like new, getting started, and that was kind of the original, thing. I also have just a super passion for, taking two polarized sides of an issue and bringing them together. So if you actually look deep in my YouTube channel, like in 2016, I did this thing I called Behind the Glass, where I felt a responsibility because Trump was running, and the rhetoric was so divisive. I wanted to sort of see if there was anything I could do about the divisiveness of it, right? And so I put Trump supporters in the front room of a focus group facility, and I let undocumented immigrants watch from behind the glass. So usually it's like consumers in front, I'm moderating, and it's clients behind the glass. But I thought, what if I could use it for social good, like, sort of this structure that I do in everyday life, right, for clients. So that was cool because like the undocumented immigrants got to hear this conversation about themselves, like what the perceptions were of them that they had never heard before, because nobody really talks that openly, right? And so this is a one-way mirror when I say the glass. So you can see the group I'm interviewing, but they can't see you, right? Then I flipped it. And I let the other side talk and the other side listen. And then I brought them together for a conversation, and I used all these sort of techniques, dialogue techniques, to get them to really speak. It's almost like undebate, like not debate, like really sort of share and speak. And at the end of it, like if you look at the YouTube channel,
there's
talk when you have
the
Heal the
talking
Divide
stick.
1 and Heal the Divide Part 2. If you look at Part 2, you'll see in the end, they actually end up like in gratitude hugging each other. These are Trump supporters and undocumented immigrants, right?
How did you get undocumented immigrants to agree to go on a TV show with a bunch of Trump supporters who want them deported?
Yeah,
I mean,
sounds like a trap.
Yeah,
well, they didn't know who the other side was. I will say that. I told them
how did you get them on TV? Because if I was an undocumented immigrant, I would be very leery about publicly putting myself out there. As an undocumented, because obviously you had to disclose that they were undocumented.
That was honestly tricky. I knew some folks that are pretty prominent in the Latin American community, and they hooked me up with a few media people who had the ear of some of the organizers of these undocumented immigrants. And so when I gained the trust of those people, the undocumented immigrants sort of said yes. And I still couldn't believe that they were doing it. Some of them were dreamers who
so they're documented technically.
They're sort of documented, right? But some of them were not. Some of them were truly undocumented. And I was so blessed to have them there. And they did take a risk.
It sounds like you created Jubilee before Jubilee was Jubilee.
You should sue them.
I don't want to sound like, but it has crossed my mind, like, did they see what I did? And then, but then I'm like, don't think so highly of yourself, Elizabeth.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I mean, parallel thinking is a real thing. So
yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, you wrote the majority of this outline, bud. So
yeah,
I feel like I've been leading it, but
no, I feel like it's been a good conversation.
It's been a great conversation.
I've been obviously doing a lot of research into like reasons why Harris lost, and everybody has their kind of flavor of the week sort of opinion about it. Is there
what didn't we cover that is really pointed for you that you've heard? Like a reason why she lost.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a fair amount. So the biggest one is, I mean, Democrats didn't deliver tangible like economic change. We kind of already touched it. Like we feel like Bernie has like a vision for economic change, and Democrats don't, and that's not really their purpose necessarily in our political system today. But another one was Democrats are too woke. Which kind of also leads in like the transgender sort of topics. And I felt like that one to me especially didn't make any sense. I felt like the Harris campaign was very kind of almost like to a detriment, a little mainstream.
They
I
purposefully avoided it.
I do want to throw. This is completely anecdotal, and I hate doing that. But well, you know who Trey Crowder is?
Yeah.
All right. I heard it from him, and then I looked it up, and I saw it I was trying to find more concrete evidence of this anecdotal story, and I found some other anecdotes parroting the same thing, but apparently the Harris campaign had a multi-hour meeting on whether or not the term sportsman was sexist, and that sort of
I feel like our tax dollars could go into something else.
Well, that's our campaign dollars.
Yeah, campaign dollars. But so and if that's the case, I am never gonna be one to be like, oh yeah, you can be too woke. But if that's the case, it's a bit too fucking woke at that point. Yeah,
sounds like something someone made up.
It does. It does.
I can tell you that if you watch, I think it's one of the later. I just did an interview with Battleground. It was a TV show with Essie Cup. And so I was on there every couple of weeks, doing and talking about my groups. And I think it's the very last one that's up there, from a couple of days ago. I was kind of surprised that the wokeness came up. So I did a group with half Trump supporters, half Trump vote, 3 Trump voters, 3 Harris voters, and 1 Chase Oliver voter, and all in one group. And the Trump voters, it came up, this transgender thing, and it wasn't on our radar really as one of the big things, but apparently the Trump campaign spent a lot of money, I don't know the number, but it's huge, on these ads that really focused on the transgender issue in those media circles. And so it ended up being a thing, even though the Harris campaign didn't, in fact, you could almost argue that she was more centrist, what I mean, on some of these issues. But that's not what they were being told on the other side.
Yeah, it's so
To the
weird.
tune of,
It goes back to the
million.
easy fear mongering. The way that they've managed to fear monger and found that it resonates with people in transphobia is so weird, because it's also less than 1% of the
Oh my God.
it's not a realistic threat. It's less than 1% of the population. The way they have managed to make that such a huge problem when it's
Every single person I've heard who has something negative to say about trans people or trans rights, I'm like, how many trans people do you know?
how many have you ever knowingly met
interacted
in real life?
with? Yeah, how many trans people have you ever interacted with? And it's never. They're like, oh yeah, no, I know. I'm like, who? Okay, what's their name? Look, where was the situation?
Give me their Facebook right now. Let me look them up.
Give me just even
what's their
describe.
name? It's usually they.
Well, you can be trans man, trans woman.
Right.
You could be
Right.
trans.
Yeah.
I do know a
We're in
trans
the
person
I
that
do-
I'm
yeah.
friends with, but I don't have anything bad to say about
Right.
them.
I have a
Exactly.
couple trans friends, but again, it's because we all run in the same circles, right? Birds of a feather. I know that if I was a Republican, probably would have never met a trans person.
And that's the thing. It's I know and the fucking idea of, oh, a trans person's gonna walk into a bathroom and rape somebody because it's a man and gonna go into the girl's bathroom. It's nobody gets raped in a fucking public bathroom. You're not gonna walk up to a random child in a bathroom because they're going to scream. It's just the very simple logic process of, if you're going to walk into first of all, what's your child doing in a public bathroom by themselves if they're that young?
yeah,
I
there's a small
just say
kid.
Target bathroom.
Yeah, Target bathroom. They walk into a Target bathroom and they're just gonna rape a child. It's the reality is that all of those types of assault, or the vast majority of those types of assaults, result in with somebody that they know after years and years of building trust, where they are going to, I don't want to say allow that situation to happen to them, but they don't feel like they can speak out against their attacker. Where if it's a random person in a bathroom, you're going to yell and scream out against that attacker. You've got no personal relationship where you're worried about the consequences of people finding out what happened in that situation. And I just don't understand how they've gotten so demonized in this situation, especially from the Freedom Party of.
To be fair, they have moved on from the bathroom discussion, except for the whole House of Representatives lady who's now.
It was more
They've circled back.
boys taking girls' spots in sports.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, I do remember
That's
that
a big
one.
one too. Currently.
And that honestly
Which
is a
again,
little bit
isn't there
harder
only,
one.
There's only
Yeah.
The number was very
It's
low
so
as
dumb.
total athletes that even exist as trans people is
Mm-hmm.
crazy low.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things where why is this a political issue? This isn't something that we should be writing legislation about. Like, this is
I mean, if you make it a political issue, anything can be a political.
Yeah,
That's
you
fair.
could, if
So-
you argue hard enough, everything's political.
Then
And
I
we
guess
will.
the kind of the
That is
backside
true.
of that is sort of this notion that basically the Democratic Party got just completely outplayed by conservative media, or Democrat media, whatever you want to call it. Just like a lack of Democratic sustained presence and of relatable media presence. Like, there's people that are potentially as famous as Joe Rogan, but nobody that really holds that same kind of platform prestige, if you want to call it that, of a podcaster, which I don't even know if podcasters make a huge difference these days necessarily.
Well, I think Trump's interview, wasn't it like 34 million watched it or something like
It's
that?
crazy.
It was
Sure.
it was huge. I mean, if you compare that to any traditional media, that's like
His
Insane.
numbers on
Off the
Theo Vaughn
charts.
were insane too, especially
Yeah.
compared to any of his other
Right.
interviews.
I
with
mean,
Theo Vaughn.
do you feel like Harris just didn't leverage that in any meaningful way, and that was a potential, maybe she could have gotten 1% or 2 more votes that way? And
I have no idea why she didn't do Joe Rogan.
Right.
I
have
was
no idea.
pissed when I heard that she turned it down.
I thought she was going to do it.
And like,
then all of a
what's
sudden
the
she
reason
wasn't.
not to? I can't think of any logical
well,
reason not
you
to.
could. There's a few arguments that she potentially doesn't do long
She
and
went on
sustained
Fox
interviews.
News. You know,
Yeah,
that's the
she
thing that's
did do
crazy
good
to
on
me.
Fox
It's like you're
News.
trying to pander to the right. This is it. This is the one that's going to
Right.
get you like the most possible exposure all at once.
Well, if you're trying to pander to the mythical moderate, still Joe Rogan still holds that, I'm not a Republican,
yes.
I'm a libertarian, I'm an independent, I'm
Keeps
a
claiming
whatever
whatever, but
pretend
he
thing I
isn't.
want to be. If we're going to pander to this mythical moderate, it ain't going to be
Yeah,
on fucking
yeah.
Fox News. Like, nobody, like, the people
get
who
on
watch
Joe
Fox
Rogan.
News are the people who are very set in how they're going to vote and who they're going to vote for. But
Also true. I
Joe-
thought that was a weird choice to go on Fox instead of Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
But then it shows their underestimation of digital media again.
And I think do it all, right? Like if we go back to the beginning of like we're in these media silos, you got to cross the silo
absolutely.
so
And
that people can hear you. You know what I mean? Like you have to.
1,000%. And I don't think it's I guess we're looking at this as an either or type of thing because
it's
she chose to
both.
do one and not the other. So if
I'm
she's
just
going
saying
to
if-
choose
if you were to
yeah.
do any, I
Yeah.
think Joe
Joe Rogan
Rogan
would
would
have
have
been-
been better, honestly.
Right. But absolutely. I do think that she should have done both and
Yeah.
taken any media chance that she had, and obviously she avoided that a
They
lot.
invested so much time in repeatedly going to those swing state rallies when they could have been doing more of this stuff, and I do think that was a bit of a mess
That's the other
up
thing.
there.
How do you feel about rallies? Because like I feel like rallies don't make a lot of sense to me.
It's a bubble.
It's
You're
a
speaking
bubble.
to your supporters,
Like you're not gonna
usually.
go to a rally of some. Very few people are gonna go to a rally of somebody they don't already intend on voting for. And even if you do, like your opportunities to go. Like we're in Minnesota. There was almost no rallies here in Minnesota for us to go to.
They also weren't trying to look like we're not the swing state. you know?
Exactly my point. But like if you're shooting because Trump did rallies here.
One.
Yeah, that was weird, but
But he did it, but Hillary
technically,
almost
I think
lost.
Biden also spoke here like
Yeah.
early on.
Yeah, Biden did speak.
So-
But Hillary didn't speak here, and she almost lost Minnesota.
It's very close.
And it was also way closer than it should have been this election. Not as bad as the Hillary election, but close. For Minnesota, especially.
The Minnesota one, I'll give it. They had 3 months. They were
Mm-hmm.
focused on the swing states, but yeah.
But it's still even if you're in a state, you're doing a rally that's a tiny portion of the population. Like you are not. It doesn't matter how big your crowds are, and they're all obsessed with that shit. But it doesn't matter how big your crowds are. That is a micro fraction of the population, and that's not. You're not really getting your message to anybody important at that point.
I
So
think it's another example of them like just clinging to like the traditional marketing thing where it's like, oh, you need to be on the ground, you need to be like talking to people in person to connect, and it's like, yes, to a degree, of course you need to do that.
So
Yeah,
to tie it back to
but-
what
sorry.
what you do and that market research is, have you gotten a feel of how these people would have been better marketed to, how these people, the communication would have been better to communicate to get these messages across where they wouldn't have been so undecided or right-leaning on things that make no sense, like the economy?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's There's a couple of things. There's the messaging, and then there's also where the messaging was placed, right? So, like, I I think the Harris campaign could have done a better job on certain messaging, right? I think she did a little bit on the economy. She could have done more messaging on the economy, to your point earlier. I think she failed on immigration. Her line was,
1000%.
I'm going to sign the bill that Trump tanked, right? But the voters wanted and needed more. Also, she didn't effectively answer some of the questions that we needed her to answer, like, why did she change positions on certain things? And there are easy answers for these things, and somehow that didn't come out of her mouth. Or like, how are you going to be different than Biden? It's one thing to say. Eventually, she got around to, I'm not him, so I'll be different. But she never really explained, I would have done this way, or what, it's a different time, so now we're going to do this, right, and not that. There are ways to talk about it, but she didn't quite get there, right? She did a lot of things right. I'm focusing on
Yeah,
where
no, absolutely. But I mean, obviously,
But-
the things right aren't what we need to focus on.
Yeah,
Right now, we
I
need to
mean,
figure out what we did wrong and how to adjust that in the future if we get a future here.
Yeah. So those are the messaging things. Then we started to talk a little bit about this. I personally think, and this is hard, she had 100 days. You can't be everywhere all at once unless you're that movie. But I firmly believe our media silos are an issue. And if you're going to try to get votes from potentially swingers, squishy voters, people who could potentially come over. And I think she had that opportunity in this election because there were so many people disenfranchised with Trump on the other side. She needed to go on more of those media platforms that are conservative and that they don't hear these messages very often. And she needed to talk off the cuff and be authentic and, and answer some of these questions we just discussed. And so I don't know if it was a matter of like, she had to firm up the base and do that and they had to make choice. I don't know. I wasn't in their campaign, but, she needed to do more in those ways. And then I think what you guys were talking about was really interesting. Like, is it archaic to do rallies and to do in person? Is it archaic to do door-to-door ground game, right? Like, we still don't know what Elon Musk did for Trump in this ground game. What was it? Was it an electronic thing? Because people were saying they didn't see people on the ground for the Trump side, right? Maybe he's got some new way to.
Elon
He like bought out Twitter.
He bought Twitter, and he weaponized Twitter in a way that is absolutely insane. And to the point where like just the massive amount of data mining that social media does, right? Like we all understand is huge. Like they know what we want before we know what we want at this point. That's why we all think that Facebook's listening to us, and why like they can predict what we want to sell us shit. And really all politics is selling us something, right? They're selling us a candidate, and he was able to weaponize that in a way where I think one of the most profound things was on the issue of Gaza, and they were pushing ads to people who were sympathetic to Israel, saying that Kamala was soft on Israel and a friend of Gaza and whatnot. They were pushing those ads to them, and then pushing the absolute opposite ad of Kamala is a staunch supporter of Israel to people who were more empathetic to the plight of Gaza. And so it's the same platform using the same data, pushing two polar opposite messages to push people to vote one specific way. And that is what Elon did. And I underestimated it because I'm like, who the fuck's on Twitter anymore? Like, I didn't understand Twitter when Twitter was big. It's so dumb to me. Like, I don't get Twitter. But I also understand that I am not the average electorate person, and obviously there's millions of people on Twitter, and it was incredibly effective. So I think that that's what Elon did. And
besides donating, what was it, $45 million?
oh, I mean,
or something like that?
massive amounts of money as well.
What he did with Twitter is more than anything money could have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably.
Because obviously, I
It was
mean,
crazy. I don't even
Kamala had
use
a
it much,
billion-dollar
but-
war chest that
Yeah,
she.
it's not about money at this point. The way they have weaponized the internet to work against us. Is crazy.
I guess one other thing I really wanted to ask you, because this has been something that I think it feels apparently obvious to me, and I've been screaming, and we talked about the mythical moderates and how it seemed like Democrats focus so much on the center and the swing voter and the undecided voter. And I'm like, there's not like 4%. Oh shit.
It happened again.
That's all, folks.
All right, awesome. So we're just gonna do this over speakerphone on for everybody else listening. So if the audio quality drops a little bit here, we apologize. Gotta love this rural infrastructure we've never invested in our shitty internet
That's
out here.
Trump's
but-
America. I just want to be clear.
But what I was getting at was that mythical undecided voter, and it was 4% is what Taylor was saying when he looked it up. 4% undecided, and I think that we really missed on turnout. We should be focusing less on undecided and more on just getting people who are decided if they actually go to the polls but don't get off their ass on election day to actually go vote. What's been your vibe on that? Because obviously we had kind of painfully low turnout, and we've said repeatedly that Trump didn't win this election. He didn't get any new votes and new support. It was Kamala who lost this election because people didn't turn out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to get candidates that people are super enthusiastic about, period, right? I mean, and we thought, like, when Biden dropped out and Kamala came on, there was some enthusiasm there, and then it started to wane at a certain point. She didn't quite sustain the enthusiasm that she came out of the gate with, and so I just think going forward, picking candidates that people are super excited about and really want to go support. So not like less about voting against someone and more about voting for someone. That's the key.
But do you think, because I feel like a lot of Kamala's messaging was pushed towards the moderates, as in, on immigration specifically. Obviously, we felt like there's a huge failure there, and she pushed hard right on immigration. She pushed decently right on foreign policy, especially when it comes to Israel and Gaza. And I feel
dodged all the trans questions.
awkward, yeah, dodging trans questions and that sort of thing. Do you feel like having embraced sort of a more progressive aspect on those policies would have shifted this in a way that would have made her more competitive, potentially, one, just by getting people out who didn't stay home, rather than, again, trying to pander to the people who, think we need to close the border, build the wall, and let Israel level Gaza?
I'm going to say something that might not be super popular. I
Sure.
don't know. But
I
I know
love that.
there are people who are saying that she should have gone full-blown left, right? And then there would have been some enthusiasm and some, I hear that because I think the extremes are really vocal, right? The far right and the far left are extremely vocal. But when you look at the numbers, there's actually more people in the middle.
But what is the middle? Where is the middle? Because the middle, and we talked about this in our last episode, but there was, the middle between Clinton and Reagan is they're not that far apart. And the middle between LBJ and Eisenhower, they're not that far apart. But the middle between, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is the fucking Grand Canyon. Where there's how do you be in the middle of that and not be falling to your death at that point?
So, sorry, I had to tell them I needed 5 minutes.
Oh,
sorry.
No,
Let me
you're all
just
good.
get in here. They're trying to start my interview, but where is the middle is the question. I mean, this is like, where is Waldo?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows where the middle is now, right? Like, some people say that the middle has shifted, left. Some people say the middle has shifted right. You know what I mean? I just think I don't know that. I don't know that she would have done any better if she had gone extreme left.
Oh, and I don't even say extreme
You know?
left, just embracing more of the people who may have stayed home on the left, where it wouldn't have been
Standard left.
the standard left. Had she just embraced standard left.
LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
I just didn't know if
a lot of the people I interviewed voted.
yeah.
That's the weird thing.
We need to
right?
interview the people
Like-
who didn't vote.
Yeah.
I didn't interview a lot of people that ended up not voting.
We need to
We
need
need
to
to
interview those
find where
people.
they
We
are.
need to interview those people. I agree with
Kick
you,
their
and let's
ass.
figure it out.
All right,
Like,
all right.
I don't have the answer for you because I didn't interview those guys.
Well, we
Okay.
need to find them.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
we'll have you.
we'll-
you need
we'll work on
find those
that.
people, and we'll have you back on because I think that is an important question. Is where are the people?
It is actually. I love it. I love that idea.
Yeah, that's
All right.
question of the hour.
Well, I know you've got another interview to get to. I know that our technical difficulties here have plagued us at the beginning and the end, which is on par for Let Them Eat Toast podcast. That is it's not our podcast without a ton of technical difficulties. So we appreciate the hell out of you being patient with us. We appreciate you coming on today. This has been a super insightful, super interesting conversation. We hope to have you back on, especially after you do those interviews of non-voting people.
Yeah.
It was great to be here. And the irony is, my interview that I'm going into right now is about tech and AI specifically.
Yes, tell us what you
Super
find.
tech. So some of the stuff we talked about, but in a different way.
Awesome.
So I look forward to talking to you guys again
Awesome.
soon.
And if you have any plugs you want to do about where people can follow you on YouTube, anything else, your projects you're working on that you want people to know about, here's your chance. Go ahead and do that.
Oh, yeah. So my handle or whatever it's called on YouTube is at Elizabeth Jarosz, and my last name is Jarosz. And you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, the whole thing, pretty much with that same name. It's pretty easy to find.
What about on the TikToks?
I got on there, but I don't do much on TikTok.
All right.
You gotta get on that.
Gotta get after it. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, everybody. Go check her stuff out. It's just real interesting. Obviously, all of us here are a big fan of data, and these are the people who provide us with that data. So we appreciate the work that you do. We appreciate you taking your time out today. And go have fun in your next interview. You seem like a busy woman, so we won't keep you any longer.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Take
Bye.
care.
And for everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in, and again, also bearing with us through our bumpy technical difficulties. If you support the podcast, we appreciate the hell out of you listening, watching if you do that on YouTube in video form or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support in a more monetary way, we've got a Patreon, we've got YouTube subscriptions, we've got merch at offjawaggon.com. Thank you, Andra, for being here again.
Correcting me on Riz usage. Appreciate
You
that.
need to know. You need to know.
I did. I was not. I was cringe. For sure.
teaching us the
Oh,
things the
God.
kids say.
Right. No cap. Maybe you could help support us by fixing our internet. I don't know.
Yeah,
If you have internet expertist, we'd love to hear your phone
If
calls.
only we had a tech guy.
Yeah, we need a tech guy coming on here. Yeah, what they keep saying, we need more leftist liberal podcasts out there. Well, hey, we're trying, guys.
They're trying to silence you.
I know.
That's right. The
It's
right
not really
wing.
the internet.
Starlink. It's Starlink right now. We don't have Starlink,
Elon's
but it's
literally
definitely
listening right now.
Elon's fault.
Hey, Elon, we love you, and we actually think that your work has been really good.
Wow, I say that about Google all the time. Maybe I should be changing it to Elon.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, I've been saying it about Elon for a while now. I'm just trying to get a cabinet position.
Oh, let's go.
Somebody actually asked me, in
Hey.
my comments or something, if
We're supposed
I
to be wrapping up the podcast.
I know, but you know how this goes. They asked if I would accept a cabinet position.
Oh,
if
I
was
totally
offered.
would. Are you kidding me?
I feel like I
would go
too.
down on that
Mhm,
Titanic for sure. Just to cause a little chaos. Try and slow down operations a bit.
Being like the Hamilton bee.
Just kidding. I would do really well.
I
I
would
would
do-
actually try my hardest, and I would do really good
Yeah,
things.
I would be straight up John McKenty.
I would do really well. I love.
Trump.
I don't even know if the cameras are on right now, guys.
No idea. Anyway, guys, we appreciate the hell out of all of you, and we will see you next week.
That's right. Thanks for tuning in again.